Welcome all. This is going to be a very casual recording session for a casual webinar on that continues our discussion of supply chains and the role of IP and licensing in securing those supply chains, or possibly going back to our last discussion about semiconductors, IP can sometimes get in the way. We've got I would say a special guest, but Michael Jason is joining us. And Michael, do you prefer Michael or Mike?
I usually go by Michael, but I'll respond to either.
And Stacey Dunn is joining us as well, and I think Stacey's Stacey, so that'll be easy. But we're going to keep this casual, a little like a dinner conversation. We talked before about semiconductors. The semiconductor supply chain has a particularly impacted the auto industry, and I think you can think of semiconductors. I think they actually, to some extent, are a commodity, especially the low-end ones. And so we thought it'd be interesting to talk about the agriculture industry, where there's a lot of commodity, wheat, corn, and the like. And that's something that Michael can chime in on, and then hopefully our auto and semiconductor experts and the rest of us, that'd be Stacey and I, can kibitz and sort of see if we can come up with a global, no pun intended, picture of how the licensing professional should think about supply chains in an era of what seem to be more and more frequent conflict, global warming, and other sort of major interruptions, these force majeure type issues, which I think before, really, we always would write these force majeure clauses, but would think, these things don't matter. I'll just copy the last person's force majeure clause. I'm sure it doesn't matter anyway. Now you have to start looking at them. And did I mention pandemics? There's another cause for concern. So anyway, with that intro, I think we can go around the horn and we'll call it an unpaid for Twitter style introduction. Can you each just say your name? We'll have a link to you in the show notes if anyone can find them. Just give us your name. This will be a sound check for those who listen to this on their in their car. So let's start on my screen. That would mean starting with Sandeep.
Yes, my name is Sandeep. I run a consulting company in IP transactions, buying and selling. Been with semiconductor industry for 2 decades.
Stacey.
Hi, I'm Stacey Dunn. I'm a patent attorney at Robic. It's an IP boutique in Canada.
Eric.
So I'm Eric Gottschling. I work in the automotive industry, and I handle tech transfer, and have been doing that for about a decade now.
Michael.
I'm Michael Jason. I'm Vice President of Legal at Richardson International. Richardson International is a Canadian-based agribusiness and food business.
Alex.
Alex Markov, working in the semiconductor industry for 25 years, in a company called ASM, Advanced Semiconductor Materials, as a licensing manager.
And I'm Dave Powsner, an IP lawyer up in Boston. Well, let's get started. If we take this sort of dinner type conversation, casual, we don't have any PowerPoints. At least I hope nobody brought any. We certainly won't play them if you do. So we're going to put Sandeep on the spot. Sandeep, to warm us up in 2 sentences, and certainly no more than a paragraph, bring us up to speed on what we concluded in our last webinar on IP, the relationship between IP and the semiconductor supply chain as it applies to autos, where there tend to be smaller or less expensive chips.
Yes, typically we have always thought of semiconductors, being applicable certainly in computers and, handheld devices and multiple of electronic devices. Auto industry is not new to the market, but the proliferance of semiconductors in auto is relatively new over the last maybe decade or so. The issue is where, as we all know, most of them are being manufactured in Asia. And if there is a problem in supply chain, how does it impact? And where IP comes into play is, can people at least get around the supply chain issues, where there's an actual supply through increased domestic production, through more sourcing relationships, multiple sourcing rather than just one source, modify their just-in-time inventories. So we talked a lot about that in the auto industry and how, certain strategies can be used. Over here, we'd love to hear from Michael and Stacey and others to see if any of those would play a part in the agro or agricultural industry.
Well, that is a paragraph that would make Faulkner proud or roll in his grave. So, Michael, with that run up, can you tell us about the agricultural industry and tell us whether IP matters as it might play into supply chain interruption and the ability of a buyer to demand multiple sources from a seller who may have IP?
So for the most part, for supply of commodities like grain, the IP tends to be on the farmer side of things. So your call it Roundup Ready canola, Roundup Ready corn, your gene patents on some of these types of things enable farmers to produce more or to use herbicides to protect the crop and thereby guarantee their yield. But the end product, the corn that you get or the canola seed that you get at the end of the day, is still fungible with most other canola, including conventional grown. So from the end consumer standpoint, whether they buy the canola from Canada or from Brazil or from Australia, it's still a fungible commodity for them, regardless of what IP went into the production of that. So we have seen in the last couple of years some more demand for optional origin contracts, where a buyer may want to buy grain from us or from an ag company and is willing to accept either Canadian or Australian grain, or either Canadian or Black Sea grain, which is in many cases somewhat surprising, perhaps, because sometimes they have different qualities of performance, but I think it's been from the something better than nothing standpoint. So those types of things don't tend to involve a lot of IP licensing per se.
Stacey, thoughts on that?
No, I think Michael summed that up, but I do have a question regarding, I guess, after the grain it's grown and you've sold it to a company that's going to produce maybe produce a product for you, pasta or whatever. Do you have any licensing tips for how you would ensure, when you do use a third-party manufacturer, how you would ensure that they can still fulfill their obligations in the case of a complete failure? Do you use like a conditioning licensing clause where you're able to either do it in-house or but a third party can manufacture it, or do you use? I guess what type of licensing tips do you have for that?
Yeah, that we're seeing an awful lot more of, particularly in the last couple of years. So we tend to supply sort of commodity-based things, whether it's canola oil for cooking, or whether it's oats and oat clusters for making different types of breakfast cereals and such. But everybody has their slight tweaks to it, right? The no-name brand versus the brand name stuff, and if people want Kellogg's or people want General Mills stuff, they want to taste like it always tastes. And so we've seen an awful lot of pressure from some of the big food companies that rely on their brand, including kind of their taste and usual approach to things, to know what's going to happen if something goes wrong.
So, and Alex and Sandeep can jump in here, but when you build a particular component or subassembly in the automotive industry, the semiconductor has to be automotive grade. There is just absolutely zero tolerance for anything else. So when a supplier says, I can't give you any more of those, but I could give you commercial grade, you just say, well, then I'm not building product. I'm just not going to do it because you can't tolerate the difference.
I was just going to ask, when you're putting in this conditional licensing clauses, how do you account for the know-how? So this is maybe more applicable in the semiconductor business, where it's not just a recipe, but sometimes it might be like personnel, a team of engineers or whatever that have to move with to produce that product. So how do you account for that?
I can see how we do that. Obviously, the trade secret and know-how as important, or sometimes I would say even more important than patents. Patent you can invalidate, you need to file it and maintain and all this fun stuff, and it's public information. Trade secret know-how is our secret recipe. So the way you protect it is you obviously have to protect the leak of information, but then you do it through agreements. The licensing is through agreements, and in agreements, it's very easy to enforce. You go to court and you show that Dave doesn't
shaking my head because Michael's going to tell you. I'm curious. I hear what you're saying. Michael's going to then say, in the instance where they had to give away their Odio's recipe or whatever it was, their cookie recipe, he's going to say that the company that gave away the trade secret that went, who knows if there was any other IP. Well, how do they feel? They're probably super uncomfortable. How do they feel about that, Michael?
We're talking about I think Stacey's question was, how do you protect it? You put it in an agreement, and what exactly you're sharing, very specify, and then there's a breach of contract. And so
are you going to trust if you're not Sun, if you're an Oracle competitor, and you're required, and Oracle's in a different industry, obviously, are you going to trust Oracle with your trade secrets if they're your second supplier? Or would they? How do you handle that?
Well,
you follow me, which is you can't trust everyone. Maybe all the Canadian agricultural producers are trustworthy, but I suspect there's a lot of producers who are not. Alex, wrap us up for the day.
Everyone has to have a business continuity plan.
Sandeep, close this thing up. Give us one paragraph, not Faulkner. Like Charlie Brown paragraph, Linus or whatever. Give us a short paragraph. Maybe that little bird.
I think it'll stay, but also Plan B paragraph will also come in.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stacey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Alex.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.